Welcome everyone to another episode of the Jam Report. I'm your host, GoodOlJM, coming to you from CSB Studios in Tampa, Florida, the birthplace of pro wrestling. This is episode 69 on this August 2nd, 2019. Yes, I am back. I took last week off to attend to personal matters. As many of you, or those who listened towards the end of my last episode, 68, had a passing in my family. My godfather at the age of 87 passed away, and my sister and myself flew out to Pennsylvania. It was crazy because there weren't any direct flights and they were to Allentown, but then it would have to have been another about 2-hour drive, give or take, because they live in this real small town in Pennsylvania. So we flew in through Newark, got a rental, drove out to the state of Pennsylvania to that small town, which was about a little more than an hour away. So it cut a lot of time off from the drive we would have had we flown into Allentown. And for the about 36, maybe 38 hours that we had, because everything was last minute. We just flew out there, and we were a bit of a surprise for what that's worth. And we paid our respects. Got to see my godmother for the first time in about maybe 6 years, give or take. The rest of her family, the extended family now, officially. And it was a very nice ceremony. Of course, saying the final goodbyes aren't always easy. And myself and my sister took enough time before everything started that Saturday morning to drive over to New York and visit my grandfather, who it's all full of irony because my godfather was buried on the day that my grandfather passed away 8 years ago, as well as one of their closest friends passed away the same day, about maybe 5 years ago. I'm going to say 6. I honestly can't remember, but he would. No, I'm sorry, longer than that. What am I saying? Much longer than that. I apologize. But yeah, those two gentlemen passed away the same day that my godfather was buried. So it's just a lot of irony. So you can imagine the amount of emotion in the air that day, personally. But each man lived a very long and great life, leaving a legacy behind for their family to follow and hopefully to keep alive for the future generations. I mean, I know I do my part best as possible to pass along any kind of knowledge that maybe my grandfather might have left me. And between he and my godfather, two of the nicest men I've ever met in my life, treated me well. Well, when I was a child growing up, just very nice, very humble all around. So, and at times like that, you take a moment to reflect a little bit on your life, what's going on, are your affairs in order, more or less. If you have any kind of trouble that you're still trying to find or dig your way out of. The old saying is always, life's too short. Don't live it too fast. It may be true to an extent. I mean, you can stop right now and realize what your age is. And for those of you who are parents, if you haven't had the conversation with your child about when I was your age, that that's when you sometimes stop and realize, holy crap. And I'm not saying that you're getting old. My point is that time has passed, and most of the time we don't realize that. So there are people who literally live a life of day to day. They go to sleep, they wake up, go to work, run errands, do whatever responsibilities they got to do, and then repeat it the next day, and maybe have weekends off. And ask that person if they've ever taken a break besides days off to maybe stop and smell the roses. Or you're in your late 30s, early 40s. Do you feel accomplished? Is there anything else you want to conquer? Are there any challenges in life that you think that you can fulfill and maybe challenge others to do the same thing? Maybe not exactly the same thing, but whatever they feel that needs to be conquered in their lives, and check that off their list. Long story short, just want to say thank you one last time, and that I can only hope to be as a greater man as these gentlemen were, not only to the family but to others, and to pay forward that message. Unfortunately, we did have a passing in the world of professional wrestling. The King, Harley Race, or Handsome Harley, passed away this week at the age of 76. I've all but forgotten how young he still was. But just yesterday, August 1st, there was an official statement put out on his Twitter account. Today at 12:50, August 1st, we lost a man that fought up until the very last of his existence. More information will be released soon, but just know that he loves pro wrestling and the fans that loved him. Well, I could say he did love pro wrestling, and he did love his fans, Harley Race. I met him several times in New York. The smile on his face would have to have been surgically removed every time I seen him, either from afar or up and close and personal, shaking the man's hand, sometimes just to pass by and say hi. Always in a good mood, always with a smile on his face. Of course, according to the Wrestling Observer, Harley Race passed away after battling lung cancer. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, Harley was hospitalized. At the time, even during and after, the information was, well, there wasn't much information. Family and those close to him decided to keep that information, not to go public. Although some of us who have been paying attention might have had an idea what was happening. I didn't want to speculate, but unfortunately, if what Wrestling Observer is reporting, and we've yet to see an official follow-up statement, at least from the Harley Race's camp on Twitter, beyond what's been mentioned there. If you follow Wrestling Observer, Dave Meltzer, Mike Johns, and so on, we can just assume that officially cause of death was lung cancer. There were reports that added complications to the lung cancer, and that was ultimately Mr. Race's demise, unfortunately. Like many that have passed, as fans, we all turn to what's available as far as memories online. Of course, back in the day, if you weren't trading VHS cassettes or happened to rent the latest WWF VHS of best of from around the world, their WrestleFests or world tours of this country and that country, especially in the late 80s. And of course his run in the NWA and not recent, but throughout the years in the past decade or so, his cameos on WWE Raw. Of course, I don't know how they beat WWE officials and creative, maybe even Vince himself, talked Harley Race to allow Randy Orton to spit in his face. I mean, some of you are probably thinking right now, oh man, anyone spit in my face. Like, well, can imagine Harley Race, legit badass, what he would have done if he was not retired and able to get his hands on Randy Orton without snapping his head off. I mean, took restraint, I would assume. Again, there had been a lot of talking into for Harley Race at that time. Of course, the earliest memories of mine were of 1987. I probably just dated myself. His match with the Junkyard Dog at WrestleMania 3. He had Bobby Heenan in his corner, the Fabulous Moolah, and JYD. Unfortunately, had no one in his corner. But besides the 93,000 plus fans in attendance, or the 80-something thousand, or whatever the official number is, at this point, I don't really care. You know, it made money. His feud with Haku, and looking back, I think they might have expected a lot more out of the feud. They had just one match, and it was for Battle of the Crown at the Royal Rumble. This was right before oh my goodness, what year was that? Yeah, it was right before WrestleMania 5. And that might have been it. I almost got my dates confused and the order of the pay-per-views. But the first pay-per-view for the Royal Rumble was 89. And he had a match with Haku for the Battle of the Crown. And both men were managed by Bobby Heenan. They were both heels. And back then, there weren't too many of heel versus heel, face versus face. We're going to get much more of those later down the line. And again, I just had this feeling that they might have expected a little bit more. I don't know if there was going to be a rematch at WrestleMania 5 instead of Harley Race. It was Hercules who took on Haku, the opening match. And I almost kind of felt bad. I mean, the crowd was all but dead in the Summit, and there was little to no reaction during introductions, during the match, and afterwards. I think there was more of an applause at the fact that the match was over after Haku won and pinned Harley Race, and that was the end of Harley Race in the WWF. No SummerSlam appearance, no Survivor Series appearance, but by then they cut it down to a 4-man team instead of 5. And he returned to WCW. A little bit, fast forward a little bit, he managed Vader for a little while. Became world champion, feuding with Ric Flair and Sting. Eventually Hulk Hogan by the time he showed up. And of course, Harley Race induction into the WWE Hall of Fame. And there's a lot more from Harley Race. I'm just going off a few memories here. I know he's had great feuds and rivalries with Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes, and I can't remember who won that match. He and Ronnie Garvin. I can't remember the outcome of that match. But yeah, I mean, he's synonymous with Starrcade, NWA / WCW's WrestleMania, if you will. They were first. Of course, WWE would never do such a documentary of Starrcade. Like, well, they were first. Before WrestleMania, they were Starrcade. And it's true. But an official documentary, I know they got the best of Starrcade. And there were a few Harley Race matches there. But in the end, it doesn't change the fact that we lost yet another legend. My thoughts, prayers, and condolences to his family and friends going through this tough time right now. And I would expect, there was a mention on WWE.com. You know what? And it's so funny, and I know I just did it. Excuse me. That when you hear of a passing of a legend or a Hall of Famer or up and rising star, either they are or were working in WWE, and the fans almost immediately go to WWE.com to see if there's any mention of it or tribute, some kind of video or photo gallery of any kind, or that they wait for the following Raw and or SmackDown to see if there's any mention. Now, I know I've been out for a week or so, and I didn't mention about, I'm not going to mention about the Raw reunion show and what happened with Jimmy Uso, which is a good example. Maybe a nice segue here. Basically, WWE's approach nowadays between Jimmy Uso and the Jeff Hardy situation, both men being arrested for DUI, or well, Jeff Hardy wasn't driving, but and public intoxication, and both men are responsible for their own actions. So we're just not gonna, slap in the wrist. At least, not even that, because Jimmy was involved in the main event this week on Raw. Hell, was put in a tag team championship match. Oh yeah, sure, he ate the pin, but he still came back later on and be part of the main event to close out the Raw show. Point being, this is now their mentality moving forward, or how they handle things if one of their wrestlers get out of line with the law, at least. And it still boggles the mind that pretty much, and it's in the contracts now of today, whether you're brand new or you're resigning, if you die on their watch, well, shit happens. Shit happens after what happened with Owen Hart, with Eddie Guerrero, among other names. I am not saying it is completely 100% WWE's fault. I am not saying it's Vince McMahon's fault. At least between Owen and Eddie, two different completely scenarios. And yes, they took care of Guerrero's family as best as possible. All proceeds of his memorial shirt went to the family. I believe they donated to the Owen Hart charity fund. Unfortunately, there was a lawsuit, and they can't show or mention any of Owen's imagery, his name, even though there was a DVD, but that was a whole different story. And they try to take care of him as best as possible, and it just got really messy after the fact. But you fast forward now, there hasn't been a death under WWE's watch. Not the one comes to mind, but however, there have been a lot of former WWE performers that have passed away, not working for WWE. What doesn't help is, and I'll agree with this, what doesn't help is that the media is like, oh, WWE superstar so-and-so passed away. Wait, what? This person hasn't worked for them in years. Or they were just fired or suspended or whatever the case was. So it's almost damn if you do, damn if you don't. When it comes to having the name or the initials WWE mentioned in the media, good or bad, like, oh, since they want to be acknowledged as the only name in town, as the only show in town as far as pro wrestling goes, yeah, conveniently, yeah, when it connects to a death, oh no, we got to do some damage control. We got to correct or make sure that the information is not exaggerated, but the fact that this person who passed away, unfortunately, did not work for our company when they passed. I can understand some companies to, cover their asses, and that's a horrible terminology right now to use, to avoid any potential future lawsuits for wrongful deaths, whether it's injury, substance abuse, alcoholism, what have you. To me, it just sounds really shady, when they put that statement together and they literally copy and paste the same one that they used for Jeff Hardy and just replaced his name and put in Jimmy Uso's. They're responsible for their own actions. In an extent, they are. They are grown men. They are adults. Both men are married. I don't think Jimmy has any children that I'm aware of, but he does have a huge extended family. So, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think it's worded properly, or at least not to the satisfaction of many, including myself. Okay, and heaven forbid that Jeff Hardy got into an altercation with someone that wanted to steal his jacket, shoes, watch, whatever. He's hospitalized. Oh, well, he's a grown man. He's an adult. He's responsible for his own actions. Or in defending himself, Hardy severely injures this person who tried to rob him, and now he's hospitalized, and lawsuits up the ass on him and the company. What mumbo jumbo lawyer logic language are they going to use to get out of that? Oh, it's his day off. Oh, he wasn't wrestling or performing, so he went on a binge. That's on him. We're not going to help you out. What if Jimmy Uso, who was arrested driving under the influence, DUI, got into a car accident, hurts himself obviously, but maybe hurt someone else, or worse, take someone else's life. Oh, Jimmy Uso's responsible for his own actions. I'm pretty sure the language would have been a lot different. But the fact that no punishment whatsoever. Hell, everyone else before this nonsense, before this, every person's responsible for their own actions. Suspensions, 30, 60 days. They suspended Titus O'Neil for holding back Vince McMahon that one time because he thought Vince wasn't being a gentleman enough to let Stephanie walk backstage first. And because Vince didn't see it that way or didn't have a sense of humor, suspended for 60 days. And then there was the backlash. Okay, 30 days. What the hell is going on? Should Jimmy had gotten a much more severe punishment? Definitely. At the very least, a fine. The man was arrested. Go back to when RVD, when he was the WWE champion, got pulled over. Unfortunately, was caught at the time. I don't know what the laws were as far as possession of marijuana. That year, what was it, 06? Might be different now in that state, but he got pulled over. The trooper was like, well, okay, you're in possession. Got to arrest you. And that went public. That went viral. And he was stripped the very next week of both the WWE and the ECW titles on live television. And then he served out his suspension. Jimmy, less than a week later, gets a tag team championship match. Eats the pinfall. Yeah, I get that. But then gets involved with a main event spot later on that night. And by the way, I'm not going to review SmackDown and Raw this week. Screw that. And the Jimmy Uso's issue is not the main reason why. But anyway, More than likely, we're going to get an 8-man tag team match out of this for this week's Raw because of what happened. And I think it's just a crock. Crock of shit. Crock of bullshit. That's what this is. What message are you giving? Not only to the locker room, but to the public who read up on this. And I thought the Randy Orton rule was an exaggeration or just plain stupid, where he should have been fired, being suspended legit 3 times. But they're loopholes. You can work off a suspension or work off a strike against you. I can go on all day with this, but there are a lot more ways to get into. So you know what? Yeah, let's just do that. Get into other stories. There were a lot of interesting stories this week. And this first one in particular involving the Undertaker, who has signed a new deal with the WWE. What's surprising here, that he may have signed, I should say, his last deal with the WWE, according to the Wrestling Observer. His new deal isn't a lifetime deal. It is not a lifetime deal. Easy for me to say. But it's a long one, so it might as well be. Taker was flirting with the idea of attending StarCast earlier this year, but he was pulled by WWE officials. Perhaps WWE felt the need to secure a new deal with him was their most prized legend for as long as humanly possible. And from a business standpoint, I get that. But at the same time, still being a business standpoint, what a dick move. And that still pisses me off that they had to pull Taker from StarCast, which, again, has nothing to do with AEW. It's a separate entity all to itself. It was on the same weekend of AEW, yes, Double or Nothing, but again, it was no different than when WrestleCon comes to town that weekend of WrestleMania, and there would be many current signed talent that would attend WrestleCon before they get into their WrestleMania appearances for radio shows, TV shows, public appearances at a certain store for ribbon cutting ceremonies, what have you. Everything is planned out ahead of time. So it wasn't maybe a week or so when The Undertaker was publicly announced that he would be attending StarCast 2. Nope. Got to pull him out. Him and Kurt Angle pulled out. Well, I hope they give their money back to StarCast, because that's bullshit too. Speaking of the Observer, Dave Meltzer reported that CM Punk, his comments regarding AEW are not at work. It happens to be his feelings. Punk, who did an interview with ESPN last week, was asked about his relationship with All Elite Wrestling, saying that texting offers isn't really a way to do good business. Which is true. I mean, the text at the very least could have been, hey, this is so-and-so. We would like to meet with you. When are you available to have a talk? For years, obviously, ever since CM Punk has left the WWE, was able to go through all of the legal troubles and the legal shenanigans from WWE in order to free him up completely, and was able to share all of that on the Colt Cabana podcast, what happened, how he dealt with it, and the aftermath at the time. And no, Punk has not officially not returned to the pro wrestling arena of any kind, of any staple, with any company. Yes, he might have made a few cameo appearances under a mask and whatnot in disguise. But because we can't see legit his face or his figure or whatever, even though he might have worn the same clothing earlier on in the day, realistically, There's no proof, because what if that was someone else, happened to be the same build of CM Punk? That way, to have the fans talking. Oh, well, no, Punk, he posed for fans early in the day, but he eventually ran into the ring to deliver a GTS and then ran out under a mask. Can you prove that? Oh, he wore the same clothing. Okay. Honestly, that doesn't prove anything. For all we know, that could have been his twin cousin. I know how that sounds like, but coming from a background of law enforcement and dealing with lawyers, that's just how it's going to be. It could be the same build. He could have had the same tattoos. That could have been drawn on. Jerry Lawler drew or did replica tattoos for Brian Lee when he was portraying The Undertaker, when it was Undertaker versus Undertaker SummerSlam 94. Could you have told those were real tattoos before that story of Jerry Lawler came out? So it needs to be proven. And I have to stick with that. But back to this story. According to Dave Meltzer, this led to a lot of fans speculating that this was all part of the plan to surprise or for surprise for AEW's All Out coming up in a few weeks. But Meltzer also says that that is not the case. But Punk is scheduled to appear at StarCast 3 in Chicago, same weekend of AEW All Out. And almost immediately, fans speculated and wondered, well, this might be it. Cody and the Bucks finally talked CM to sign up and come back to wrestling. It would have happened a long time ago. I am not saying, I want to stress that fact, that I do not want to see CM Punk back in the ring, at least of a wrestling ring. I'm not saying that. If AEW existed back when he first left, maybe that could have been an option to jump over. But he's said it numerous times, on numerous occasions, and he's asked almost every week on any interview that he conducts for at least the first 2 years, that his passion was gone. That experience he had with WWE was ripped out of his chest, and he saw it turn black before his very eyes. Might have been an exaggerated description, but his passion was gone. Anyone that says that, it is very difficult to convince him to have him turn around and come back. Is it impossible? Maybe. But that's up to CM Punk. That's up to Phil Brooks, the man. I never met the man. I never got a chance to sit down and speak with him and find out what's going on in his head one day into another. As human beings, we have the right to change our minds. And maybe for those diehard fans that want this so bad that one day you probably hear or see a tweet or a report, CM Punk returns to the ring for this company on this date, live on pay-per-view or whatever. How many of those fans followed him to his UFC career? And he still wants to fight in MMA. Despite his 2 previous performances in UFC, he's 0-2. Still wants to fight. This man deserves a lot of respect, just for saying that, just for wanting to do that. Despite, again, his previous performances in the octagon or in the cage, depending where he fights. I thought it would be for UFC again, personally. But again, it's up to him. He may or may not change his mind in a few years. He may never at all. Can he still be involved with the business? Sure. Just don't expect it to be in the ring. I know it's cliche to have him come back and be, the commissioner, the general manager. It's been done. A protege, maybe, a manager, backstage agent. I mean, something keeping him involved in the business, but just not being involved in angles or storylines. Probably the best thing for him at first, in the beginning. If, again, big if, decides to sign up with AEW or with anyone. He's a businessman. And everything has to seem, sound, and feel just right or good enough to make him sign his name on any contract. got to cover all your bases. He's been around long enough to know, well, if it looks and sounds and smells like it, why bother? And in this case, it was a text message. Hey, let's make a deal. Let's talk. Let's offer. No, stuff like that. I have no clue exactly who sent out that text in particular, but for something like that, should be made face to face. Anything personal? Want to tell a friend how you feel, what's going on, or whatever decisions or actions they've been doing lately? I mean, a text, sure, they're your words, but you got to think a little bit old-fashioned. To look them in the eye, to let them see, feel, and hear your tone of what's going on, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. And at least, at the very least, they can give you that much respect that you went out of your way to do that in person. This being could have been a good offering is no different where they could have extended an olive branch, if you will, to ask when and where we can meet and talk business. Hell, they could have gone to an Olive Garden and had a conversation there, or any kind of diner. But time will tell. I always say that. Time will tell. Despite Roman Reigns nearly killing a cameraman on the set of Hobbs and Shaw, the movie itself was pretty good and fun. I was able to watch it last night, an early screening. Bit of a no spoilers, but it's what you come to expect from these Fast and Furious movies. This is a spin-off, by the way, of just exaggerations. I thought the plot, the reason why everything was going on, was a bit weak, but as far as the actions go and the balancing of humor and very, I'm going to say, very interesting and very smart cameos. And I'll leave it at that. And the chemistry was there on everybody. If you're wondering Roman Reigns' performance, well, he didn't have any speaking dialogue, to my surprise. I thought he did from the trailers that we were given, but final cuts, I'm sure there'll be a deleted scene or two on the Blu-rays when that come out, and he was just there. But yeah, The Rock put out a video of behind-the-scenes footage of Roman Reigns, and it's on video, where the Rock and Roman in the fight scene, they're both holding these giant axes. They look at each other, and then they turn to the side, and what they were supposed to do is pretend to throw. So you see Rock and Roman wheeling back this giant axe handle. They're about to throw it, but Rock stops about halfway. But Roman kept going in the rotation, and that handle flew out of his hands right into a cameraman. And thankfully he was okay. He was a good sport about it. But Roman was so apologetic throughout the day, according to the description. Welcome to Hollywood, I guess. And the cameraman, he's a veteran in the business. Unfortunately, he has a tongue-twisting name, but his first name looks like Luke, so let's go with Luke. Yeah, he felt the effects, and as I mentioned, Roman was super apologetic about the accident, but he handled it like a pro. The cameraman did. And then later on, Roman Reigns spoke to ComplexCon Chicago, discussing his getting back into the WWE ring after his illness, saying, I think I'm doing a little bit better, actually, just because I'm not so much more focused on my health. I'm so much more focused on me as an individual and just making sure that I stay in a place where I can help others. So you noticed, even after Roman Reigns made his announcement that he's in remission, He slowed down a little bit. He was able to come back in time for a WrestleMania appearance versus Drew McIntyre. More or less trying to get back in the main event scene. A brush with the Universal Championship run. But now even more so. Probably more so because of the premieres and the obligations to promote Hobbs and Shaw. Roman Reigns hasn't been much on WWE TV as of late. But even before then, looked like a bit of a slowing down. There was that SmackDown Summit or whatever the hell that was called. Literally made his one line about Shane McMahon to, kiss his ass or whatever. And that was it. And that was at the beginning of the show. Roman Reigns never showed up again. He was asked about the difference between acting and wrestling, saying it was a different vibe being on the set and obviously getting used to just performing in front of this person, that person, your coworkers. When you're in a live environment where people can react and do anything that they want, they can throw you off your game. Roman also stated that while he's been, quote, bit by the acting bug, still wants to focus on wrestling for the time being. Shortly after the holidays, Roman Reigns began filming Hobbs and Shaw with his cousin The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and he credits The Rock for his role. Roman Reigns would say, "I had already auditioned. My tape was already out there. Dwayne was keeping tabs on me, making sure everything was going good with my recovery, and I let him know I was feeling a lot better." He told The Rock at the time, "I think this return might come quicker than planned." And yeah, 4 months, that's crazy. And I just had wanted to take my time. And that was Roman Reigns' description of it at the time between announcing his leukemia and getting involved with the production of Hobbs and Shaw, which I do recommend anyone to check out. Again, I thought it was a lot of fun and pretty good movie overall. And Roman Reigns, well, who knows? I mean, if you see it, you know what I'm talking about. And for what they had him do in front of a camera, I'm sure he can do a lot more. And yeah, because you had two pro wrestlers, I'm sure there were others that were playing the roles of relatives and extras in the background. Couldn't really tell. But yeah, having two pro wrestlers in one movie in an action scene, you're going to expect a couple of wrestling moves. And when they say, don't try this at home or don't do this in your backyard or what, yeah. Thankfully, this is a movie. And there's one particular move that Dwayne Johnson performs towards the end on, well, it's a German suplex. And he does it against a huge rock. No pun intended. So the actor he does it to was literally caught between a rock and a hard place. So had that been real life, so to speak, yeah, that person would not have gotten up. No way. No freaking way. Moving on. As it was reported, they might have been the first one to report this, but anyway, TMZ Sports reported that Jerry the King Lawler is now seeking $3 million in damages from the Tennessee Police Sheriff's Department that he claims led to Brian Christopher Lawler's 2018 suicide. Of course, that was the official report. Lawler's lawyer claims that Brian told police about past suicide attempts. Despite these warnings, police allegedly made no effort to protect him from himself during the arrest, after placing him in a general cell and getting into a scuffle with inmates. He was placed in solitary confinement with his shoelaces intact after he allegedly cried out for help repeatedly. Brian used his shoelaces and a large bolt in his cell to hang himself. The suit also claims that the police department was ill-prepared for a suicide attempt, only possessing children's scissors to free Brian and try to rescue him. Jerry Lawler claims that he has spoken directly to the Tennessee sheriff that he's suing and explained Brian's issues. The sheriff allegedly promised that proper treatment would be provided, and Jerry chose not to bail out his son out of prison at the time because of this promise from the sheriff. So there were a lot of speculations coming out of this. Was it a suicide? Was he beaten up properly before with the other inmates that he was placed in with? Were the injury sustained in that altercation led to his demise? Not to mention that it's not brought up here, but the precinct, if you will, was going under renovations, and that the security cameras were not online at the time of this incident. So that could have provided a lot more detail, a lot more information for sure as to what exactly happened. So at the very least, they're not denying that there was an incident with other inmates, that Brian Christopher has cried for help, and that a lot more could have been done, for sure. I mean, despite being or having your building under renovations, doesn't mean the fact that you change, like, well, okay, well, this was taken out, this is being replaced, this is missing, or this is not here yet kind of thing. We're not prepared. Bullshit. Again, background in law enforcement, you make sure everything and anything that you need at your disposal is available. It may not be up in the cabinet or up in a shelf or in a drawer somewhere, but it's somewhere. It has to be somewhere, just like first aid kits, just like fire extinguishers, among other things that could provide any kind of assistance or help or save a life needs to be provided. Now, with that said, Brian Christopher, that is, cried out for help. Christopher mentioning that he has attempted suicide before. Why weren't these red flags? I mean, were these deputies, were these troopers, were they rookies? I mean, what the hell? Did they literally just come out the academy earlier in the day? If someone tells you, I've tried to take my life before, even if they're joking, you need to take that with the utmost seriousness and do something. In this case, remove their shoelaces, remove their belts, anything that they could use to turn into a knot around their neck and be strong enough to maintain that weight, you remove it. Any sharp objects on their person, you sit them down somewhere safe where they're not surrounded by blunt objects or anything that they could use to harm themselves with another sharp object like the edge of a table, any ornaments that's placed on the table or bookshelves, what have you. Pretty much, if you're wondering where exactly would that be in my house, well, probably nowhere. Hell, you can't even stand the person in the backyard and not have them, have them unattended and have them look around to see what they can use to hurt themselves. And to be perfectly honest, it won't take long. It will not take long. You have to literally, if you're going to sit them on the couch, you have to literally keep your eye on them. You're reaching for a phone, your cell, or a cordless phone in the house, whatever it is. You get this person help. You get that person help. Have whomever's going to come to the house to pick them up. They're going to say, no, I was just joking. They'll be placed on suicide watch. No one, again, joking and not putting that aside for a second. Anyone that's going through any kind of depression or through an episode in their life or been bullied, it needs to be taken seriously. And as a fellow human being, you're obligated, especially if the family or a friend, obligated to help. Yeah, these deputies, these officers, they were doing their job just to, arrested someone else. No big deal. Who beyond that, who am I to them? If any of that mentality or that train of thought was going on during this incident and didn't care less about another person's life, You should not be working in law enforcement. They got a bad rap as it is, law enforcement does. And just because I have a background in law enforcement doesn't mean that I agree with everything that's happened that we see on the news or of a video that's gone viral. There are officers that take matters in their own hands, and it just makes things worse. Sometimes even a loss of life. So going on these detailed information has to be proven that everything has happened by the lawyers, by the attorneys. And $3 million, well, it's a lot. I'm not saying Jerry or his family do not deserve some kind of closure in this, but if you read between the lines, Lawler was lied to, or at the very least, misinformed about what really happened to his son a year ago. Hard to believe, but it's been a year. The Lawler family deserves justice. Jerry himself has been involved with other types of accusations, with which I'm not going to bring up here, that were just horrible even back then. But those charges were dropped, I should say. And for something like this to happen to a parent, it's just inexcusable, especially when you feel or think or even assume that they're incarcerated, they should be physically okay. At least until we sort things out as to what happened, and maybe or maybe not bail them out. But given a promise from a sheriff and the complete opposite takes place, yeah, something's amiss. Maybe they'll be charged with being, the deputies, that is, and the sheriff. Maybe for alleged neglecting the cries for help, ignoring flat out Brian Christopher's comments about previous suicide attempts. All that's going to bite him in the ass. So there's plenty of time between now and whatever trial date they're going to set from the sheriff's department's point of view to figure shit out and do what you can to give some kind of closure to the Lawler family. Davey Boy Smith Jr., or Harry Smith, wants to follow in the footsteps of Bobby Lashley and Jack Swagger into the Bellator cage. Doing an interview with, by the way, shout outs to Harry Smith, Davey Boy Smith Jr., who just celebrated a birthday this week. 34, I believe. Man, I didn't realize how young he was. But yeah, big dude. But Davey Boy Smith Jr. conducted an interview with the Hannibal TV that the Major League Wrestling superstar has discussed an MMA career, or at least a possible one, and that he's been aspired to do so. He revealed he hasn't yet talked to anyone in Bellator. He says, "I need to be back in the training room all summer and getting in shape. So yes, I am interested. I haven't spoken with them yet. I need to get back to California training with Josh Burnett again." So there you have it, folks. He hasn't mentioned that he's retiring from pro wrestling. He did leave New Japan recently, mostly because of creative differences. He still has ties with MLW. And most recently, I mentioned this earlier as well. Well, not earlier, but in a previous episode, his very own sister, Georgia Smith, has become one of their interviewers and on-camera personnels, which I also encourage anyone to take a listen at my very first Talking with JM episode with Georgia Smith, discussing about her family, getting to know her more, and her relationships with her brother. So Harry does have the size. He does have the strength. Might be, I would assume he might be, when you mentioned getting back into shape, maybe you go for a more leaner look. He will slim down. So whatever last imagery you've had of Harry Smith, more than likely be a more slimmer look, as MMA training does that to you, to your body. It's a completely different regimen, completely different diet, and you'll be sweating so much that your body has no choice but to, burn off that fat. And that happens. I'm not saying that Harry's overweight or anything like that, but whatever body fat he might have now, that'll more likely be gone within 6 to 9 months. So would it surprise me if we don't hear an official announcement from Harry Smith or anyone from his camp to maybe make that official announcement for his very first debut MMA match in about a year from now. If not, give it 2 years. It'll be a long time, but you want to make sure you got all the bases covered. More than likely, he'll probably be between a light heavyweight and a heavyweight. And Bellator, I have the same accomplishments as UFC, and that's fine. That's fine. This is not the MMA weekly wars or whatever you want to call it, as opposed to the Monday Night Wars. But Bellator is a place where UFC doesn't give you an opportunity as far as a fighter making a comeback or a legend that's just not ready to hang it up yet. You go to Bellator because you might have been a name or you might have drawn at one point. We'll have your comeback match, and here it is. But Harry's neither one of those. He will have a great, tremendous legacy in his name alone to carry into Bellator whenever he makes his debut and make an impact. It's different. Definitely, he does have a great relationship with WWE, but it'll be a much longer while now before he even assumes or thinks about making a comeback there. But it would be nice because even then, if he does, and of course he made already an appearance recently at the Hall of Fame this year, but still being under contract with MLW, he can't make any other kinds of appearances. Yeah, Rob Van Dam made an appearance last week, even though he's an official Impact wrestler, but everything was agreed upon ahead of time. So I say, good luck, Harry. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully you mix, no pun intended, such an impact that you just might be Bellator world champion one day. Speaking of impact, the former Emma, or Tenille Dashwood, has signed with Impact Wrestling. She was a free agent after her Ring of Honor contract expired, and she will now be because Impact moved up to Canada, the headquarters, as a member of the women's division, which will feature the likes of Tessa Blanchard, Taya Valkyrie, and Rosemary. Dashwood will make her official Impact debut on their TV tapings coming up in Mexico City on August 15th and the 16th, which is in a couple of weeks, so be on the lookout for her TV debut. Hulk Hogan had a sit-down podcast with Stone Cold Steve Austin for the Steve Austin Show. It's a hell of a listen. Of course, being the topic of Hulk Hogan, makes you wonder what was said as Hulk, what was said as Terry, or both, Jekyll or Hyde, whatever. But giving this man the benefit of the doubt, he did discuss or bring up some of the questions that the fans will have been wondering, as Hogan goes into great detail of some of the many operations he's had on his back, 9 surgeries, which he eventually ended up suing the Spinal Institute over here in Clearwater, Florida. And I don't know if you heard or came across this, but there was maybe about a few months ago, maybe nearly a year ago. That particular spinal institute, among one or two others under the same banner, mysteriously shut down. No word of warning to the employees. They showed up for work, saw that there was a sign saying that we're closed, returned home, wait for further instructions or communications. They just shut down. Unfortunately, I was not able to find a follow-up story as to why this happened, but at the time it was crazy. And this was long after the suit with Hulk Hogan. So I'm not saying they had anything to do with this, but I mentioned it because I actually visited the very same institute to discuss some of my issues. And at the time I wasn't insured, so it would have cost me an arm and a leg in order to repair what's going on in my back. So yeah, you figure that out. But I thought that was beyond interesting and beyond coincidental. But yeah, Hogan would have 9 surgeries. And basically that was it. That was after the 9th one, and the 8th and 9th were the worst of them all. He says, I went in for 1 back surgery and it turned into having 9 back surgeries. I actually wrestled The Rock with a knee replacement, a hip replacement, and then when I had my other knee and hip done, I kept going. But as soon as they cut my back, it was game over. I was hoping that if they could cut my back one time, I'd have the fusion like Shawn Michaels did and could keep going. But the doctors that wanted me to have the fusion said, try everything else first. I went to a place called Laser Spine, Spinal Institute. They cut me 6 times and they basically took me out of the game. They cut so much bone away. Things went away after the first 6 surgeries, and then the last 3 surgeries, well, after they told me my new wife, Jennifer, I'd never walk again after the 6 surgeries, it took me 3 more 12-hour surgeries to get up on my feet, rolling again. I can't wrestle anymore, but I'm really cool with other than this darn arthritis kicking in. And I'm going to be 66 years old in 1 week, which is true. His birthday's coming up on August 11th. He goes on to say, I still work out with weights, use light weights. But my parents, before they passed away, when they were my age, their hands were crippled up like a sideshow freak. His words, not mine. Their hands were crippled and swollen and everything like that. So with the vitamins and taking care of myself with organic food, I'm not there. But the main thing is the arthritis. I have no idea what that would really meant to you feel what it means to you. And boy, the arthritis is definitely something that changes the game. But I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. You know, I don't mean to laugh at his misfortunes here, but he goes explaining all that detail. And there was a lot more than that. I'm just giving you the abbreviated version. From his back surgeries to his arthritis, his back issues, his knees, his hips, and all that. He ends it off, but I'm doing good. Yeah. Kneecaps replaced, hip replaced, back surgery, 9 12-hour surgeries or whatever. Yeah, but I'm good. He is Hulk Hogan to the very end, no doubt about it. And in case I don't get an opportunity next time on a Jam Report, happy birthday in advance to the immortal Hulk Hogan. And I do encourage anyone who hasn't yet to take a listen for the Steve Austin Show with Hulk Hogan. It's a hell of a listen. I know some people, including myself, can be a little, well, what's the word here? Maybe, well, I try to go in open-minded when I listen to any Hulk Hogan interview or podcast, because after a certain incident, I mean, and there were other examples, but this one in particular was the biggest one of them all. Makes you wonder, well, who's really speaking? Is it Hulk Hogan or is it Terry Bollea, or is there an in-between? But I think, personally, it's mostly Hulk Hogan, because this part of the interview was about pro wrestling and what's preventing him to have any kind of involvement. With that said, he can't wrestle anymore, so possibly no bumps. We don't know exactly the details as far as how much damage these 9 surgeries did to him. Yes, he's working out. Yes, he's still a big man. He posted recently on his Instagram recent weight loss, and he's trying to get his abs back. So he's doing a very good job there, but I'm sure at a price where by the time he gets home, he's twice, maybe 3 times as sore as it used to be during his last couple of years run with the WWE and Impact Wrestling. So it sucks. It really does. He looks like he can go. Less than part-time, but he looks like he can still go. Do we want to see another Hogan rematch with anyone? I mean, for nostalgia purposes, sure. Probably won't go no more than 5-10 minutes, and that includes the entrances and the post-match celebration. But, I mean, he can't wrestle Ric Flair, that's for sure, and vice versa. Anyone involved at that Raw reunion, but I mean, Sting and Sid Vicious didn't show up. I mean, although Sid called in advance saying he's not going, I'm like, oh, okay, well, you're not coming. Sting is another whole other mystery. I haven't seen any story as to why Sting didn't show up, even though he was advertised during the pay-per-view. And I mean, Austin could go if he wants to, but you know, what more can he prove? He had a hell of a reaction and pop during the reunion. Shawn, well, we know Shawn can go. Again, it's just another one of those when he wants to, and probably won't again after parts unknown. But Hogan is yet to make an official announcement about retirement from the sport. I know. And and I guess he's weighing his options to at the very least, have some kind of involvement with the business and still make an occasional appearance here and there. It just happens to be Raw reunion was here in Tampa, where Hogan lives, so it's a quite short drive to the arena. And by short, I mean maybe at the very least an hour, depending on traffic, the time of day that he left his home or his beach house to head to the arena. But personally, I'm waiting for that official statement about Hulk Hogan retired. Yes, you can kind of take his statements here on the Steve Austin show when he said, "I can't wrestle," but let's make it more official. But that's just me probably asking for too much. Rhino, remember him? He did an interview with Sporting News talking about his last run with the WWE and explained why he enjoyed time away from television and why he chose to re-sign with Impact. Says, it means a lot on several different things. One, just for the simple fact that it's a company on the right path for almost 2 years, that being an Impact. They have been moving in a direction where wrestling fans want a company to go into terms of letting the talent be the talent, having bookers booking the matches on the card opposed to writers. Some of you might think, well, that's a shot at WWE. Well, yeah, I can see that. I can understand that. I'll just say, well, he's not wrong. He's a man that still definitely wants to continue on in the business, but when you're working for a wrestling company that's being looked at and treated more of a TV show, I mean, yes, that's really what it is, but it wasn't always. But because it is a TV show, you can get these TV deals. On top of that, still get a sports deal. Right on, I got to get back into this. But it's just convenient when they switch it up. They being WWE to have it work out for their benefits, where they make more money. And believe it or not, they're probably making more money now than they have during the Attitude and the Ruthless Aggression era. Because there was a time, and it may not get there again as far as financial woes, despite the ratings dropping almost an entire point this week for Raw and SmackDown, back underneath 2 million. But they might not have that issue for a while. And when they do you think they're going to care? Karen Q recently underwent surgery after suffering a broken ankle during a live event for NXT, sustaining an injury while teaming up with Bianca Belair in Atlanta, Georgia, taking on Rhea Ripley and Reina Gonzalez. The incident stemming from a pin attempt by Karen Q herself that was broken up. Karen was signed to NXT earlier this year in February, and when it comes to her timeline from this point forward, there's been no confirmation as to how long exactly she'll be out of the ring. There's said to be footage of this somewhere online. I have yet to see it, but it really sucks. You know, any kind of injury, especially after signing in less than a year. But as the old saying goes, it's not ballet. And it kind of reading this, it kind of reminded me of the one of the episodes on Netflix from the Glow series, and it was Liberty Bell, who was just going through so much shit right now, or at the time of the episode, and going through a divorce, balancing training and working with Glow and being a mother, the pressure of performing well, putting pressure on herself, wanting to be the top talent in the company, had no one to turn to, had nowhere to go, and found in a cigarette case, she found blow from the director, Sam. These are all in characters, by the way. So she took it upon herself to do a line of coke, and this was right before she had a match with Zoya, the Destroyer, who also was her best, at the time was her best friend after she slept with Liberty Bell's husband not once but twice, and on one occasion got her in pregnant. But anyway, during the match, you can clearly see Liberty Bell is lights are on but no one's home. They go into the spot of a single leg Boston Crab. So Zoya's looking around like, what's going on? Let's go to our next spot, because that was not supposed to be the go home spot. Liberty Bell hangs on and she cinches up, and we don't know until the next episode that she broke her ankle. And at least in the TV show, Zoya did not require surgery, just be in a cast and let the bone heal on its own. And that kind of, for some strange reason, that Karen Q story reminded me of that episode. Now, I'm not saying there was any, inside attempt to ruin Karen Q's career. No, it's just the broken ankle. Like, oh, where did I last see that? Because I was binge watching seasons 1 and 2 of Glow on Netflix recently, and came across it. Then I read the story here of a follow-up story with Karen Q. I was like, I couldn't help but to reminisce and to go back. So, no, I'm not saying Bianca or Ripley or Gonzalez had anything to do with it. No, it's just an unfortunate accident. And again, no timetable on her return. So NXT TakeOver Toronto II is coming up on August 10th, next weekend. And the lineup is as follows. In a 2 out of 3 falls match, thankfully they cut that down tremendously on Raw and SmackDown, but here will make sense, as the first fall will be a singles match, second fall will be a street fight, and the third fall will be announced, if they go that far, the night of, as Johnny Gargano will once again attempt to regain the NXT Championship against champion Adam Cole. The Street Profits will defend their NXT Tag Team titles against the Undisputed Era of Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. For the North American NXT Championship Triple Threat match rules, the Velveteen Dream defends against Pete Dunne and Roderick Strong. So here's another opportunity for the Undisputed Era to have all the titles of NXT in the same faction. For the Women's NXT Championship, challenger Mia Yim versus Shayna Baszler. And a bit of a grudge match. Io Shirai will take on Candice LeRae. I expect each and every single of these matches to kick ass. I'm sure most of you would agree that it's rare, almost impossible, to have a takeover show to be disappointing. Well, speaking of Netflix, I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier, talking about my Glow binge watching. But The Big Show is getting his own Netflix series, as Netflix teams up with WWE Studios, and they released an announcement regarding a live-action comedy series called The Big Show Show. With production slated to take place on August 9th, ironically, the same date of season 3 of Glow to debut on Netflix. Yeah, okay, I'm tired. Sponsor. The show will also have 10 episodes. Will revolve around the Big Show, who will be portraying himself as his teenage daughter comes to live with him and the rest of his family. So, Big Show has had opportunities and does have a pretty good comedic performances in him. We've seen it in Knucklehead. If you haven't seen Knucklehead yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Probably one of Big Show's best performances in front of a camera as an actor. An actor, not an actor, but, well, you know what I mean. I want to say not the SNL episode with The Rock in it. He's also had a cameo in Jingle All the Way with Arnold, the Terminator, Schwarzenegger, and wasn't much for comedy there. It was more of an action scene. And where else did I see him? And comedy-wise, you know what? I think that was it. He had that movie with Dean Cain, and nothing else comes to mind Big Show wise with movies. I can't think of one right now, but but I think I could see this working. Of course, it all depends on the first season performance. 10 episodes, assuming they'll be half an hour long, more or less. You can binge watch that in a day, and depending on the numbers they get during and after its debut, we could see a second season. And mind you, this is only the second project announced with the relationship between NXT, between Netflix and WWE Studios. As you remember, earlier in the year, there's going to be a Hulk Hogan biopic having Chris Hemsworth, yes, Thor from the MCU, playing Hulk Hogan himself. Now, it's said that it's not going to touch or go anywhere near the last Hogan trial that we've all seen, with the sex tape and the not so nice language that he used in said sex tape, but focusing more on his earlier career with the WWE in the 80s and possibly get into the 90s. And curious, because we've all seen DVD autobiographies, we've all seen documentaries involving Hulk Hogan when it comes to certain points in his career, particularly in the 90s, where he jumped from WWE into WCW. was trying an acting career with TVC. We saw Thunder in Paradise, and he was lured back into back into wrestling, and particularly with WCW, maybe because the money was just too good to pass on, and he took the deal. Of course, the formation of the NWO, WCW woes towards the end of the 90s, and how long it took him to get back into the WWF at the time with the NWO. Point being, how much of those details, how much of those facts or lack thereof will be mentioned in said biopic. And Helmsworth, he has big shoes to fill regardless, because there are a lot of there's a lot of pressure on the man, and I'm sure he's been given the pep talk already. It's like, listen, wrestling fans is a whole different audience from your Marvel fans, and no one is not saying that he can't be both a fan of Marvel and fan of wrestling, and among other things, but it's expected to have a different kind of performance. We don't want to see Thor acting or pretending to be Hulk Hogan. I don't know how much of his accent he's working on, or maybe he'll be dubbed. Who knows? He has the build for it. Yeah. Look at Hogan back in '93, his last match for a while in the WWF at King of the Ring, losing the title to Yokozuna. That was the slimmest we've seen Hogan in that company post Steroid Child. And that will lead on for a few more years into WCW before he bulked up a little bit more after the fact. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's similar to like the Glow series actresses who had to, not all of them, but they had to go through pro wrestling training camp. So, if he hasn't already, Thor has taken his first bump, has hit the ropes, has learned, hopefully, performing the big boot and leg drop. So, hopefully they'll reenact where Hogan went to training camp for the very first time and had his leg broken by Inoki, and the time when he was spent in the hospital and contemplating whether or not to go back. And I think he went back just a few days later. His leg wasn't fully healed, but he went back, and he was given so much respect for that. And the rest, as they say, is history. So we'll see if successful, and depending how much they cover in his career span, maybe a sequel, and we'll get into the whole 90s, early 2000s Hogan run, and the mid 2000 to 2010s with his divorce and his Hogan Knows Best TV series that was canceled out of nowhere. At least Burke had a season, but wasn't as successful. But nonetheless, very curious, very interesting to see how that will play out. Finally, AEW has announced on October 2nd they will make their TV debut on TNT live from the Capital One Arena in Washington, D.C. So far, we are expecting to have an appearance from Jon Moxley, the former Dean Ambrose, and 2 matches have been announced. Cody Rhodes takes on Sammy Guevara, and in a 6-man tag team match, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks versus Chris Jericho and 2 surprise partners. Well, I first heard this a few days ago, and jokingly I said, can you imagine if Jericho's surprise tag team partners are going to be Enzo and Kaz? No, I mean, it wouldn't make sense because that ties in with Ring of Honor, but you never know. It will be a nice swerve. I mean, would I want them to be that surprise partners? I mean, what else are they doing nowadays? And it'll be a nice touch. It'll be an interesting twist, if you will. I'm not pushing for it to the nth degree, but again, I mean, can you imagine? What if? I would imagine the crowd reaction would be like, oh, okay. I'm expecting maybe New Japan guys or AAA guys or people we know of, we just haven't heard much of recently. Maybe some of these new signees that's been happening this whole summer so far that have yet to debut on a pay-per-view or any other live event with AEW. But I'm not saying for sure. I'm not saying it's confirmed. I'm not saying it's even rumored. But this is just my thought, where all I simply said was, can you imagine if it was Enzo and Kaz? So until other rumors start circulating, until then, I mean, there's plenty of time, if not to be Enzo and Kaz, but to be any other tag team or two single wrestlers to come together, team up with Jericho. Well, we'll see. Time will tell for sure. It's been a crazy week, and I'll close the show right now, right here. Just want to thank everyone for their support during the tough time I went through. I would like to also, once again, share my thoughts, prayers, and condolences to the friends and family of Harley Race, who are now going through themselves through a rough time. It sounds selfish to say, but on my part only, of what I went through. Life beats you down. You do lose people along the way. But life doesn't stop. You can take your time to mourn and to heal emotionally, mentally, psychologically, what have you, like I have. But the clock doesn't stop. And you just have to keep moving forward. I'm not forcing that on anyone. I'm not forcing that on myself. But it's just how life is. And unfortunately, we move forward with a heavy heart. And with that said, I just want to say, for all that we have lost, take a time, sometime today, to remember them and share the good times with someone, and tell those close to you that you love them, and whenever possible, to spend time with them real soon. It's good old JM. Till next time.